What is going on, everybody? What is going on? First of all, please pardon me if maybe I sound a little off. Feeling a little under the weather today, man. Just typical. It's always this time of year that gets me. But with that being said, today was the day. Today was the day we were all waiting for. Raheem Morris was officially introduced as head coach of the Atlanta Falcons at a press conference today inside Mercedes-Benz Stadium. At that press conference was obviously the man of the hour, Raheem Morris, Terry Fontenot, and team president Greg Beadles. First and foremost, actually, y'all know the drill. Y'all know the drill, but I'm gonna go ahead and say it anyway. Hit the subscribe button, hit the post notification bell, hit the like button. Help me out, man. Help me out. Grow this channel. Really this off season, the big goal is, and I'm obviously not just going to focus on Falcons content. I'm definitely also going to dive, into some other content as well. I'm going to dive into some Braves content, as we are getting closer to baseball season and, we inch closer to opening day. And also, man, I've been kind of thinking maybe, might even start doing a little bit of wrestling content. But with that being said, just, help me grow this channel because we still have a lot to talk about, when it comes to the all season and particularly how this team might look in the most important aspects. So, yes, your support would be greatly appreciated. So, Raheem Morris was introduced as head coach of the Atlanta Falcons today. At the press conference was obviously Raheem Morris, Terry Fontenot, and team president Greg Beadles. This was actually the first time I've heard Greg Beadles speak. This was the first time, I've really heard from him. So, yeah, Arthur Blank was not there, so they actually said he had a little, medical issue or procedure he underwent over the weekend, and, he is feeling better. He was very bummed out not to be there. So, get well soon, Mr. Blank. We're all praying for you, to get back, get back to your joyful self. We all know you are. Pardon me, but all seriousness, get well soon, Mr. Blank. He really wanted to be here today, but it also speaks volume that he didn't, postpone it, because there's probably some other owners that probably would have postponed it, for their own, personal ego, to stroke their ego. It's good to see Arthur Blank didn't do that, and he did put the team, but before himself and, his own personal ego, and obviously he had Greg Beadles there, in his place. Obviously, we heard from Terry Fontenot for the first time in months. We had a Terry Fontenot sighting today. Obviously this was Raheem's day, but we finally were able to see Terry Fontenot. And obviously we should have saw him 4 weeks ago, at the other press conference. You have to say that disgraced press conference. But it was a completely different vibe today. I do have to say that. It was a completely different vibe. So obviously they started the press conference off. Forget what. Let me pull this guy's name up so I can get it right. I know. He's basically, I guess this is like Arthur Blank's spokesperson now or liaison, Brett Jukes. This is Arthur Blank's liaison, I guess you can say, or, his spokesperson or whatever, so he was up there speaking on behalf of him, and he got it all started. And then obviously you heard from Greg Beadles and, heard from Terry, they welcomed Raheem, expressed gratitude, talked about the search. It was an extensive search. They interviewed a lot of candidates, rising candidates, interviewed former head coaches. For first and foremost, Bill Belichick's name was mentioned more than once in this. It was mentioned like 3 or 4 times. It was like mentioned in 2 or 3 questions, actually. So, obviously, still, there's a hot topic. And I said this, and I'll never take it back. I would have absolutely welcomed Coach Belichick aboard if he were to have come here, but he's not here. He's not coaching this year. And you have to honestly kind of look and say there is a reason he's not coaching this year. Ra is our guy, and we're riding with Ra. So, you heard Terry Fontenot speak, and when he was speaking about Raheem Morris, and this was the biggest thing that stuck out to me this press conference. Terry talked about Raheem has, won 2 Super Bowls, and he's been to 3, and he said this word for word, we're going to get him another one. So, right then and there, Terry Fontenot called a shot. He said, there's no more playing around. We're going out and we're getting a ring. That is the goal. And obviously that should always be the goal. But that's the reason why we've made this higher. We are ready to go out and get a ring. We have the team. We have the base. We have the foundation laid. Now it's time to go out and get that ring. So, man, Terry called a shot. He said straight up, we're gonna get Raheem another ring. More importantly, we're finally gonna get this franchise their first Super Bowl ring. And it's ironic because it is 7 years to the day of we know what happened in Houston 7 years ago today. So they called their shot and they said what they wanted. It obviously you have to take their word for it and you have to hold them to it. Listen, we have given Terry. I'm going to go ahead and say this. I'm a big Terry Fontenot guy. I like Terry Fontenot. I like his philosophy. I think he has a great mind for football. But the excuses are over. You gotta pass the first time because number one, the coach you were operating with was an absolute doofus and did not know what he was doing with the groceries that you got him. They were fresh groceries, and it's like he was malicefully, or however you want to put it, I don't even know that's a word, going out and just letting them rot away, letting them expire. And number two, you had a literal doofus. You had Squidward. You had if cancer was actually a human right in your ear talking to you 25 times a week, you weren't even able to be the GM. It appears that has changed now. At least it appears. And there was still some stuff, said in this press conference that, it raised some concerns for me. It did. But, we're going to see. You have to, see how is this thing actually operating in Flowery Branch and around this organization. But Raheem got up there. Raheem, man, beautiful family, father to 3, has a beautiful wife. Just talked about how grateful he was for his family, his extended family, everyone. And, talked about coming home. He said this. He said Atlanta is like home to him. That, it's not like these other, realistically, if you were to go up and ask Arthur Smith, has Atlanta always felt like home? He'd probably tell you, he may have never even been to the city of Atlanta before he was hired. I take that back because the Titans did play here when he was the offensive coordinator. Outside of that, maybe he's never been to the city of Atlanta. Or if he has, he's certainly he's stayed in Buckhead. He ain't been in the city of Atlanta. Raheem has talked about, he feels a part of this community. He feels a connection. He feels like this is home and this has been home for him. And then this is a full circle moment. And he spoke very highly of Arthur Blank, gave a lot of gratitude to Arthur Blank. Man, gotta tell y'all something. I'm already getting the vibe of a bromance between Raheem and Terry, man. You can definitely tell that this is Terry. It definitely will work better with Raheem versus working with Arthur Smith. And obviously, Terry didn't go and, put Arthur Smith into the dirt. Raheem may have, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But, he gave thanks to Arthur Smith, said Arthur Smith was a big part of, and to be fair for an aspect, yes, he was. Arthur Smith was, a part of this. But Arthur Smith was also a big liability, especially in his last year here, and just how he let his ego take over. So, to me, obviously Terry, because Terry worked with this guy for 3 years. I didn't expect him to say anything less about Arthur Smith than, he gives, him and his wife and his family, the best of luck in Pittsburgh now. I'm not shocked Terry said that, because at the end of the day, Terry's that type of guy. Terry's a very button professional. He's not going to go out, and just say, oh, yeah, fuck him, screw him. He was awful to work with. I hope he fucking fails in everything he does the rest of his life. Terry wasn't going to say that. He wasn't even going to allude to saying that. But, man, you can definitely tell him and Raheem are going to work very well together, way better than him and Arthur Smith did. And you can tell that, obviously, there's always going to be some agreements, some disagreements. However, that they're going to be able to function better together. And Terry is finally, hopefully, going to be able to do his job now that the big problem is out of the picture. So Raheem gets up there. He expresses gratitude. He talks about Sean McVay a lot, has a lot of praise for Sean McVay, calls Sean McVay his best friend in the whole world. In which I think really, the fact 3 years and they have that close of a connection, said, right before he left LA, they just, talked about, the 3 years that they had together. Obviously, won a Super Bowl in those 3 years. And, this year, the Rams also had a pretty good year, made it back to the playoffs, with a lot of young guys on that defense, and really said, he's forever thankful for that time, and said, that was a very valuable experience to him. But Raheem, he said the same thing Terry said. He said this. He said, I want to bring a Super Bowl here. There is unfinished business, is what he has alluded to. And there's been unfinished business now for 7 years. There is unfinished business. And there's going to be unfinished business until the business is finished. And we should all know what that business is. And then he said it himself. He said, I want to see Arthur Blank. I want to see Warwick Dunn. I want to see all of the greats be able to hold that trophy knowing it's ours. And that's what else can you ask for? What because me as a fan, listen, you could have said whatever you wanted this press conference. And I liked, he showed, and Raheem is obviously, he has a way with the media, and that you could definitely tell that, there were some people that, in that media that, obviously had already known, and he was happy to see again. It was in a way kind of like a reunion. It was like a family reunion is really what it felt like. Him, saying the one lady, he very excited to see her, very excited to answer her question. A lot of guys, telling him welcome back, and that was really, something you got to look at and say, obviously there's that, but then he was able to still convey off, that winning demeanor. He wants to bring a winning culture here. He said, we want to win football games. We want to have a winning culture here, and we want it to end in a Super Bowl. So ultimately, him and Terry have put the pressure on themselves because they have said it, and at the end of the day, obviously, that is what you want to hear, but that's what you're going to be held to, because I don't think I ever remember hearing Arthur Smith talking about a Super Bowl. I don't think I ever really remember that. I think Arthur obviously talked about, And obviously Arthur had a, very scummish way with the media, which, is, I've honestly said, it was not my biggest issue with Arthur Smith. My biggest issue with Arthur Smith is if you're going to act like that, you better walk the walk. And that's going to be the same thing with Raheem. You can be all friendly, jolly with the media. End of the day, you can say whatever you want to say. It's time to walk the walk. And obviously, he alluded to Dan Quinn. And I think there was even a question, where are you going to be able to tell the difference, between that this is going back to the Dan Quinn era or that this is, Raheem? And, I can't necessarily fully remember what he said, but, he talked about, a winning culture. I think that might have been the, answer where he talked about wanting to win a lot of football games, wanting to have a winning culture. And obviously he conveyed he wants a Lombardi. He wants to bring that Lombardi to Atlanta. And he expressed gratitude for the fans that he wants to bring that back, and not just for the players. He wants to do it for the fans. And listen, obviously I would love to hear that, but you're not going to talk your way into a Lombardi. You got to go and you got to take it, and you got to take it at whatever means there is. So listen, the talking is great. I want to see you go do it. And he's really put himself, and Terry Fontenot has too, because, man, listen, Terry Fontenot, we've given him the benefit of the doubt. Listen, this is a second head coach, year number 4. There is pressure on Terry to win this year. There is. You have to make the playoffs this year. And they talked about they want to win the South. And then you go from there, but you win the South. And that is how it is. The South should be the goal this year. And obviously, we got to figure out who the quarterback is. Obviously, we have to figure out all the other big moving pieces on the team. They're still, filling out some depth, maybe get another edge rusher in here, all the typical good stuff, we'll talk about later on. However, they talked about the South is the goal. So ultimately, the pressure is on to win the division this year. There is no grace period. Now it's saying, okay, we don't win the division this year. It's already, time to, go and blow it up again. No, it's not, because, obviously you don't know how the other 3 teams are going to do, but you can go ahead and look at it. The Saints or the Aints, absolute fucking stupidity. And with the cap situation, the Bucks are getting ready to have to pay Baker $40 million a year. And listen, Baker Mayfield, he had an amazing season, but Baker Mayfield is also maybe one of the most inconsistent quarterbacks in the NFL. And obviously Carolina, they just got Canales. They have their guys in there, and they have a hunger to win. But still, that's a mess in Carolina. That's not something that they're just going to be able to fix in 1 year. So this is the year the Falcons have to go out and win this freaking division. This is the year that you have to do it, and they put pressure on themselves to go and do it. So, yeah, that's really, when looking at it, you have to go and you have to be able to compete for that division title this year. Let me see. What else did they talk about? Oh, I'll say one of the red flags for me that, makes me say, at least we assume, but, nothing is sure. He talked about this is the 4th time Rich McKay has hired him. Now, granted, we have heard, that Rich McKay, now granted, maybe this is just because Greg Beatles hired him too. That this, everyone, in Arthur Blank's brass hired him. And Rich McKay is a part of Arthur Blank's brass, a part of AMB Sports. Terry Fontenot hired him. So ultimately, looking at that, yeah, that maybe that's just what he meant by that, but we said it from the start. You mean to tell me there was no connection at all with Rich McKay? So ultimately, I don't want to see Rich, and I'm glad Rich McKay was not at the press conference today. That's the one thing I was really glad about. I was glad I didn't have to see the motherfucker in there today, and I'm glad they let Greg Beatles fill in for him. Because I'm glad, Arthur didn't go ahead and say, yeah, well, I know I've said Rich, you're over at Atlanta United now, but I'm not going to be able to make this press conference today. I'm going to need you to fill in for me. Hell no. I would have not. I might have shut that shit off immediately. So I am glad that Rich McKay was not at that press conference today and let him go over and mess up Atlanta United. But still, that there is a little bit of concern there. You're saying you were hired. This is the 4th time you've been hired by Rich McKay. I don't really know how to feel about that, to be honest. I still think there's a little bit of a concern there. So ultimately, trust that Rich McKay isn't, a big part of this anymore, that he's just over on the business side, and FIFA, obviously the World Cup's coming to Atlanta here in 2 years, and they really have him focused on that. But I don't, I've said it once, I'll say it again. I don't want Rich McKay anywhere near this organization, and especially football operations. Let's see. What else did I say? Oh, he sure as hell dissed Arthur Smith, because one of the questions late in the press conference was about, what players attracted him? What players does he like? And he said straight up, Drake London, Bijan Robinson, and there's other ones too. But you really mean to tell me him mentioning those? Because he could have mentioned anyone. He could have said, he could have said Jesse. He could have said Grady Jarrett. He could, and maybe I think maybe the question was actually about offensive players. But Grady, he's a defensive mind. He's a head coach. We'll talk a little bit about that in a second too. He could have said anyone. He could have said it's about the team. It's about Grady Jarrett, who's the heart and soul of the team, because it's about Jesse Bates. He could have said it's about AJ Terrell. He could have, but the fact he said those two in particular tells me, we know exactly what he meant. He ain't deny it all day. We know what you were doing there. We know what you were doing there. Shout out to FedEx boy. Give him give him his one last little spotlight here. Because it's a new face in here now. and the other thing too that I said, he will not be calling the defense. It's going to be Jimmy Lake. And he said this. He said, I want to be involved on both sides of the ball. I want to be a head coach. And I have confidence in Jimmy Lake calling this defense, and obviously Zach Robinson calling the offense. And that's how it should be. You're the head coach. And we've seen, and you saw how it worked out with Dan Quinn trying to call the defense, trying to because you're calling the defense, you're pretty much the defensive coordinator in there. There's no purpose for an actual, defensive coordinator, because you're calling the defense. That's basically pretty much just your assistant. That's pretty much just a quality control coach. And the same thing really for Arthur Smith and the offense. And the big thing with Arthur Smith was his ego. And that ego was too damn large to control, but especially, with a defensive head coach calling plays, it really doesn't work much often. So I'm glad he's, taking that step back. He's going to be the CEO. He's going to overlook both sides. Obviously, if something's wrong, then he'll step in and say, whoa, all right, what's going on over here? But he's going to be the CEO. He's not going to, try to make this all about his ego. And that's really the biggest thing. You can tell that this is a man that has learned a lot. This is a man that, has had tutelage from the great minds in the NFL, from the Shanahans, And another thing, too, he mentioned Zach Robinson in the light of Kyle Shanahan, and pretty much put him in that same conversation, which I'm telling y'all, Zach Robinson is going to be a head coach in 2 years. 2 years max. There's no denying it. That the guy is going to be next in line, especially if this offense absolutely explodes this year, which, look, you get the right quarterback in here, it will, especially a young quarterback, which there was a question, I think actually two questions about the quarterback position. And they didn't give any specific answer. They laid out the options just like I have. I've said, and they said you could draft a quarterback, you could go to free agency, or you could trade for one. Now, trading for one, I think we know which particular one that is. So even though they say trading for one, there's really only one that you seriously consider trading for to be a starter, and that is Justin Fields. So they literally said, Justin Fields is one of our options, and, you have to evaluate everything. To the people that actually thought there was a chance Desmond Ridder was going to be the starter next year, where he basically dejected that. He said, hell no. He said, no, it ain't rolling here. It's not happening here, Jack. Hit the road to somewhere else. Get out of here, Heineke. Get out of here, Dad. Listen, call your wife. Y'all have a beautiful family. We're both fathers. We're both in the moving process. I'm having to move my family all the way across the country. I don't care where you move your family. It's just y'all need to get out of Atlanta. Get out of the city of Atlanta. So yeah, that's where it is. It's a new era, at the head coaching position. It's going to be a new era at the quarterback position. And I've said this last night, I'll say it again. I honestly feel like, the move to go is drafting a quarterback. Let Zach Robinson get with that young guy. Let him mentor him. And, as I said, and the fact he mentioned Drake London first and foremost shows me Drake's getting ready to go off, by the way. That's what that shows me. I think that's really all of the major elements of the press conference, actually. I didn't intend on staying on here too much longer. I definitely intend on coming on here later in the week. As I said, I'm feeling a little under the weather right now. Guy got the stuffy nose, and typically with me, whenever I get under the weather, it comes in stages. First I feel like absolute shit. Then, it's a runny nose, sneezing, then it's coughing, and then there's all sorts of, and before you know it, I'm over it. So hopefully a few days I'll be over this. It's, February, I'll always, get, under the weather this time of year, allergies just, but with that being said, that's really how I think you look at this thing. I think, he almost scared me for a second. He was talking about being fast, and I thought he was about to mention, he didn't mention anything about no brotherhood in that. I said last night, and I meant it. I don't want to hear anything about no brotherhood. I don't want to hear anything about no fast and physical. And he didn't mention a brotherhood. Now, he almost mentioned fast. I'm like, oh, you better not. And then he's like, fast, and he went on something like having pillars. And I'm like, all right, you almost got me there. You had me for a second. Anyways, man, listen. I'm happy for Ra. You can tell this is where he wants to be. You can tell he feels at home here. But now it's time to get at it. Because you came in here and you called your shot. You said, we're coming and we're coming to win. And now it's time to win. It's time to take the steps of a winning franchise in the National Football League. It's time to go out and it's time to create that winning culture. Same for Terry Fontenot. And listen. And Terry even said one of the things that, he talked about, one of the questions was obviously you got to get, north of 7 wins. And he said it's not necessarily, about the record. It's about the process. We've been going through the process for 3 years, bro. The process is over. Distrust the process is over. It's time to win. And it's time to win, because if we don't win next year, a lot of people are going to start looking at you with a little bit of a side eye. But overall, you can tell these guys are into winning, and you can tell that they're going to take the moves to bring a winning team out of this franchise in 2024 and so on. But as I said, actions speak louder than words. I'm excited to see where they go in free agency, how they tackle the quarterback position, whether they draft one, that pick up a free agent, maybe they trade for Justin Fields, where they go and they fill out the rest of this roster. And now we have our head coach set. His staff is pretty much set. Now it's time to get into the quarterback conversation. And obviously there will be some guys, I want to get in contact with. I want to do some shows with. Wolf is one of them. I want to talk with Wolf about this. Another guy's ATO Will, obviously. Get y'all on the show. Talk about it. Obviously we'll still talk about the hire. But now it's time to look at other things. It's time to look at how we're going to attack the quarterback position. It's time to look at how we're going to really build that winning culture. But with that being said, I will see you guys. I don't know when, maybe later this weekend, somewhere around there. Obviously, Super Bowl weekend. Listen, exciting times, but it's time to go out. It's time to prove a point. Actions speak louder than words. It's time to win. With that being said, I will see you guys in the next one.